Hello and welcome to Word on the Square, a podcast from City University's Centre of Podcasting Excellence, the show where we hear from the people who are shaping the podcast industry. I'm Charlie Brown, and I'm joined by my fellow MA podcasting student, Tim Utsick. Hey Tim.
Afternoon, Charlie.
So today we're listening to a chat that our lecturer Sandy Waugh had recently with Hannah Àjàlá-Rahman, who amongst many great things is the producer of the much acclaimed BBC Sounds podcast, Love Janessa. So let's have a listen and see what you think.
My name is Hannah Àjàlá-Rahman. I am an international reporter, journalist, and a podcaster. I'm the presenter of an award-winning podcast, true crime podcast called Love Janessa.
So part of the skill in trying to set up as a credible podcaster is knowing how to sell your idea. What would your top tips be for people in preparing that process?
Think of anyone that could listen to it and go, I find that when it comes to the pitching process, especially when you're tinkering with ideas, always expand that reach to a taxi driver in West Africa, to a working professional in Canada, to a middle-aged person in Italy. What could each of them look at and find appealing through listening?
Because we often talk in podcasting that it's quite a small and specific market, but actually increasingly these days you've got to find that market in lots of different places.
Yes, it's absolutely massive. And I feel like sometimes you need to see it, even though it's audible. But that's why it's so important. I'm saying this as a really avid traveller. You need to travel with your ideas. The power of radio. I've been in small communities in West Africa where there's like 6 or 7 men surrounding a pocket radio to learn about this conversation about sports between these young men in America. There are so many links, and I think the bigger you think of your ideas and how far they can travel, it really teaches you about the reach. And when we look at really successful podcasts, there's a reason why they're always being listened to. There's a reason why there have been dozens and dozens of episodes and series created out of it, because there's an appeal.
One of the amazing things about working in the environment here at City is the ideas are so extraordinary.
They really are. My goodness, we've listened to 11 incredible pitches, so well thought out, so well researched, and with the bits of feedback we've given them, it's just so good to know where they are already at a point where, for a majority of the ones that I listen to, honestly, I can see amazing commissioners like Wondery, BBC Sounds, CBC Podcast, commissioning that. It's really good.
So it's actually about trusting your own instincts to some extent, isn't it, as a creative, and going, do you know what, I really do think this will work, I'm going to give it a go.
I think that's where it starts, isn't it? Like when you look at that gap, when you do your research and realise, wow, this actually hasn't been done. And I think this is advice to everyone. There will never be another you. No one can ever tell a story the way you can. And one commissioner's trash is another commissioner's treasure. Don't think that because it's been rejected once that that's the be all and end all of it. Definitely diversify the type of people you want to push these ideas forward to.
It's quite a hard thing to take the first time it happens though, isn't it? And someone goes, I don't like your idea.
It can be hard. And I know there's millions of quotes, when one door closes, another opens. But I think it just starts with that self-belief of knowing, hey, like I've put in a lot of work with this idea. This is my baby that I've unleashed into the world. I'm going to show it around a few places and then figure out if it needs more work. Maybe if it's not for now, maybe it's for a few years from now, or maybe it just needs a complete resurfacing.
So what would your little gem of advice be to anyone who's thinking of trying to experiment with their first idea?
I would say have fun with it, because an idea turns into a process, and it turns in you almost being in a relationship with this idea, especially if it's a series. That's going to take a good year plus of your life. So have fun with it in the sense that you actually enjoy what you're reading and researching. It's enthusing you. It's helping you to envision the script. There could be some cliffhangers and, potholes that need filling and some guests that you're discovering along the way with your research. You genuinely need to really like what it is that you're doing, you're researching and you're learning about.
That was Hannah Àjàlá-Rahman speaking with Sandy Waugh recently here at City University. Great stuff that she came out with.
No, absolutely. I have the one commissioner's trash is another commissioner's treasure. And that's advice for a lot of things, really, that maybe one person wants one thing, but, not another thing. So keep at it. Definitely.
The great thing about great advice is that it usually applies to everything. And this does not just apply to podcasting. I think that's excellent advice, that if any idea that we have in life, any adventure that we have, any mission, that we should never just give up the first challenge to it.
She said something about it, your idea or your creative endeavor being like you're in a relationship with it, which is something I never really thought of. And that's kind of wild to put. Like you said, you don't give up on it on the first sign of struggle. But, you're in a long up and down process with this thing, with this entity, and you keep going with it. Which an interesting way of thinking about it.
It is definitely. Well, I think her final comment about the need to have fun, I think that's really important.
Why are we doing this if we're not having fun?
Yeah.
What's the point of anything if you're not having fun?
That's true. As she said, it's recognizing that you are going to be spending a lot of time, a large part of your life is going to be spent on this, potentially. And recognizing you need to be, what's the word she used? Enthused, which made me think of something that we've been told many times, which is the question you ask yourself, would I want to listen to this? Well, if I'm not enthused about what I'm doing, then how can I expect anybody else to be enthused by what I'm doing?
Passion really shows in things you do. And if it is forced or sounds forced or looks forced to the listener or viewer, then it really shows. And that can not be faked very well.
No, exactly. And I think thinking about the listener, about the sort of person who's going to listen, of course, you start with yourself. Hopefully, you start with, would I listen to this? And then, of course, there's that interesting evolution, which she refers to, in a sense, at the very beginning, when she says about the whole different range of people that might listen. And obviously, diversity is something that we all strive to introduce into whatever we're creating. But it got me thinking about way back, right at the beginning, when we heard John York. And it's a line that's stuck with me in everything I'm doing now, which is that, OMG, it's me. That's that moment you want, hopefully, in a listener or a reader or whatever they're consuming, where they say, that's me. I get this. I'm connecting with this. And if you can get that, obviously in the intimate medium of a podcast, hopefully you've really got a hit there.
You got to create a reason to care.
Yeah. And to keep coming back.
Absolutely. I think she had many good lines in that from the top to the bottom. She kind of had just great nuggets of advice. And when she sat in with our pitch to product, she had lots of positive advice.
Yeah, and I think that clip spoke to what we'd all experienced during her feedback. Very positive feedback. Very clearly she'd listened. She'd listened to what did she say? 11. I'd lost count of how many of us are pitching. But
she said 11.
Yeah, 11 pitches, and she listened to every single one. She was very sensitive to what people were saying, and I thought it was extremely helpful. And the positivity, it shines through what she just said in that interview. It really was her style, and I think we were very fortunate, as we are with all of the speakers that we've had here. But I think Hannah was a great example of the sort of the caliber that we've had, and somebody from within the industry. I think it's quite clear has had her challenges, and she's managed to get through them and create some amazing stuff. And Love Janessa is a wonderful example.
You only get that kind of perspective by having done it, and she's definitely done it. She's been around the block a couple times and done the creative thing in podcasting, and so now is in a position to give great advice to students at City just like us.
Again, I think it's so important that issue about rejection and how we handle that, and I think that's really great advice to take, because clearly it's a tough market. Anybody listening to this, anybody that's even tried any sort of podcast production will know it's not an easy market out there, and it's not necessarily going to get any easier.
No, absolutely not. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Word on the Square. A big thank you to Hannah for coming in and speaking to us students and to Sandy. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and until next time, be sure to keep an ear out for the word on the square.